What's up, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Dominate Every Aspect. And in this week's video, I wanted to talk about how to choose an appropriate show. So as all of you know by now, I'm in the middle of my contest prep, and obviously being a pro bodybuilder, my shows I have to be a little bit more selective upon. Now, I can't just go and do any local show. I personally have to travel. But let's focus on someone for right now that's an amateur. And ideally, especially for like a first-time competitor, what I recommend is at least choosing a show that is somewhat in your general geographic area. That'll just kind of prevent you from, battling all the stress of having to travel. Just makes things a little bit easier, especially for a first-timer. You want to know that you're actually going to like it, so you don't want to have to waste a bunch of money and travel across the country, thousands of dollars for something that you potentially might not like. As you kind of come up in the sport, and this is what I did, when I first got started, I did a local show that was about 30-45 minutes away from my house, and then as I kind of got up in the ranks, started seeking out pro cards, that's when I started to travel a little bit. But if you're somebody that's in that state right now, what I would recommend as far as looking at potential shows is, one, are they offering pro cards? A lot of people want that, but what I always recommend is get in contact with the promoter of the show. Sometimes they may advertise that they're handing out pro cards, but in fine print, or it's not even mentioned, they have to have a certain number, and I'm right there with them. You should definitely have at least 5, if not 7 to 9 competitors in a class in order to get about a pro card. I'm all for that. Another thing that you have to consider, and this is my 2 cents, is that you should look at previous pictures from competitions. Many of these promoters have websites, and on those websites they're going to have pictures from their last show. One important thing to look at is the lighting. Is the lighting clear? Can you see the athletes? Do they look good on stage? Not necessarily evaluating their physiques, but the lighting itself, because the last thing that you want to do is you're going to want to go to a show. You're not going to want to go to a show where the lighting is dark. You're posing in the dark, and I've been to a lot of shows like that. I personally haven't competed in shows like that, but it's a waste of time because you can't see any of the cuts if you're posing in the shadows. So look at previous stage pictures from last year's competition or a couple years competition, and if you see a trend of poor lighting, just run away. So for you guys that are looking to compete, first consider a geographic area, if they're giving out pro cards, depending on how many competitors, and if the lighting is good. Now let's talk a little bit about organization to organization. Now, for those of you who follow natural bodybuilding, you know that there is quite a few different organizations, and with those organizations come different costs. Now, what I always recommend, at least if you can, try to stick to 1 or maybe 2 organizations that first time, just to cut down on cost a little bit, because as you know, you have to just buy an organizational card to even compete in a show. So if you compete in 1 organization in a couple different shows, or two organizations, once again in a couple different shows a piece, that way you'll save a little bit of money. And then once you turn pro, then that's where you do have to do some traveling. So for this year, I'll tell you guys now, I think this is like the first time I've said it in a video. I have some shows planned, obviously, that I'm shooting for, and since I'm a pro bodybuilder, my shows are limited. And unfortunately, this year, one of the shows I was planning on doing got canceled. They pulled Open Pro Bodybuilding, replaced it with Open Classic Physique. That's a topic for another day. I wasn't too happy about that. And they're only having Masters Bodybuilding. So I'm actually not doing that show anymore. But right now, my first show is planning on being the Pro International on September 15th. The next show was going to be in Chicago the following weekend, the one that I'm no longer doing. My second tentative show right now is actually going to be the OCB Yorton Cup. That's going to be in DC, and that's in October. And then the goal is obviously to qualify for the World Championships at the Pro International in the lightweight division, and then compete at the World Championships in the IPE back in Kansas City on November 10th. So those are my shows. And for those of you who don't exactly know where I live, I'm located about 30 minutes outside of Chicago. So I'm going to go out to Kansas twice, and I'm going to go out to DC once. So I'm going to do a lot of bouncing around, and that's what I have to do as a pro bodybuilder. You do have to travel. So those of you who are amateurs, enjoy sticking with your shows that are within earshot, because I will have to have very long car rides, and I will have to go on a couple planes for these shows in years to come. So hopefully you guys, that kind of helps you pick your next show on those little tips to look out for. So as always, guys, keep dominating every aspect. We'll see you soon.
Young City Slicker.
Might this be today? Instantly download after purchase. Industry standard beats.
Young City Slicker.
Might this be today? Instantly download after purchase. Might this be today? Might this be today?
Young City Slicker.
Instantly download after purchase. Industry standard beats. Might this be today?
Young City.
Instantly download after purchase. Might this be today? Might this be today?
Young City Slicker.
Instantly download after purchase.
Young City Slicker.